good afternoon, those in the US time and Caribbean time. And, well, if you've got anybody in the Far East, well, gosh, they must be nearly bedtime. So happy to have you all. My name is Roger Barnes. We're here again, our usual 2-weekly show, episode number 4. For Caribbean Rum Chronicles. And as you would have seen on the post, we are serving up rum mixers. And we'll tell you a little bit about what that implies. But let me quickly introduce you to my usual band of criminals that keep me company every show and co-host the event with me. So I'll go in order that they're appearing on my screen, which is the Rum Doctor. So please, Kelvin, say hi.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 4. We have an exciting, full fun episode for you guys today.
Thank you very much. And then next on the list is Mr. Emmanuel Ferris-Hugh, better known as Manny, unless he corrects me and starts asking me to call him Mr. Ferris-Hugh.
No, Manny's good. Good to be back. Good to see you all.
Thank you very much. Third on the screen, it should be first, Lizette Davis of Rumboat Retreat in Grenada, the place you have to stay when you're in Grenada. Say hello,
Hi,
Lizette.
everyone. Thanks for joining us again. It's a pleasure to be back.
Good, and she's now become officially my new rum saucer in the Caribbean after discussions this week. Hasn't delivered yet, so we'll have to wait and see. And last...
Give me some time, Roger.
And last, and definitely least, is Mark Woods of Rumbling, the man who goes around and shares rum with the rest of the community nationally in the UK. Say hello, Mark.
Hello, I'm having a mixer with no rum in it at the moment.
Oh my God! Well, I've actually got my mixer here, so I'm having a rum and tonic, English Harbour, and some tonic.
No, I'm having just pineapple juice. So no rum.
No rum.
No rum.
Oh, okay. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. I can see.
We get it wrong later.
We'll get there eventually. So yes, today is about serving up rum mixers. As we discussed on episode 1, the Caribbean has a culture of drinking their rum either straight on the rocks or with mixers. We'll give you a little brief history on that in a minute. And so today what we're going to talk about is those mixers that are commonly used across the Caribbean, mixers which are synonymous to specific countries, territories, islands. We tend to refer to the countries in the Caribbean as islands. And then we'll also talk about the rums that will be mixed in those islands, which will, some of them may surprise you because you may think that some of the mainstream rums are not necessarily the ones that are drunk in some of those islands. And we will also follow up by, for those of you who are bartenders, who love your cocktails, we have an array of cocktails that we have taken from some of those mixers. Well, they've all been developed from a mixer and into a cocktail that would make that cocktail a little bit more interesting. So if I start off with a little brief history, and I'm always happy to be corrected by my panelists, and they will, because they're not afraid of me. I think historically we can always say when rum was introduced into the Caribbean, quite often it would have been drank as a shot, and you may have a glass of water on the side, which you would drink the shot, consume the water to reinvigorate you. We'll talk a little bit more about that later on, and then you'd call them up again. I suppose many of you have seen movies where that type of behavior might have happened, maybe in Westerns where you see they generally used to call for a shot of whiskey in the old American Westerns. That would have developed to drinking rum neat. As the quality of the rum improved, then it became more sippable. Then with the introduction of ice later in the centuries, when did we start drinking ice, Manny? 18th or 19th century?
It would have been like kind of turn of the century.
Right. And then ice
transformed drinks because it kind of changed the way we made drinks, especially in the Caribbean, Cuba specifically.
Right. And And I mean, when you think about 18, when was what's the famous bartender, Jerry Thomas? 18, what do we talk about? 18, late 1800s.
Yeah.
That would have been, who claims to be the first cocktail bartender, that would have been the revolution of ice as well, wouldn't it, in around that sort of time?
Yeah.
Right. And then rum on the rocks. Then eventually would develop into squeezing a bit of lime into our rum, which is still a common practice in the Caribbean. We obviously developed a culture for drinking overproof rum, particularly in the English Caribbean. And it's still very popular in the English Caribbean, and we will discuss some overproof a bit later on. And I know growing up, we would either give a drop of water just to mellow the strength of the rum. But I think chasers, and where we are now, chasers stroke mixers became popularized in the 20th century. We'll talk in a while about Coca-Cola sort of being it is the number one chaser in the world. And it most definitely is the number one chaser in the Caribbean. But I read a statistic that 1 in 6 spirit drinks in the entire world are consumed with Coca-Cola. That's how much we drink Coca-Cola with alcohol.
Wow.
So that's sort of changed the industry. And I think we're going to talk, Mark wanted to talk a little bit about later on how sometimes the chaser was not necessarily mixed into the drink, but it was also drank on the side. But in the Caribbean commonly, and we'll talk a little bit about out of this talk, hopefully you'll develop some street cred so that when you go to the Caribbean and you walk into a rum shop, you'll know what to order and the norms of what to order in a rum shop, or in Jamaica we'll say a rum bar, but rum shop is acceptable as well. And you'll know what sort of how to order your drinks and the type of chasers that you should be ordering with them. And also commonly we don't order a drink you don't order a rum by a glass. You'll order something which we call a Q, which developed from being essentially a quarter of a bottle, and it would get.
You call it a Q, Roger. I think different islands call it different things. I mean, in Trinidad they call it a nip.
There you go. There you go. So we have different ideas, but it's the same. It's the same bottle.
A small bottle of rum of I guess it might be 250, 300 mils. I can't remember what the size is, but it is a
smaller bottle. Normally, I know in Jamaica it's a 200 ml bottle. That's how we developed the term Q, because 200 mils is almost quarter of 750 mils.
So, this size, this is a Mexican rum. It's a bottle of rum I picked up in Mexico. But this would be like the size of a bottle you get, and this bottle is 250 mils.
Right.
So
right. So quarter of a liter. Right. And you'd order the Q, and you'd go away to your table, and therefore you wouldn't have to keep coming back to the bar to top up a drink. It was like having your own miniature bottle that you might have in a nightclub in England or on a fancy table in Manny's Bar in Islington, in Lackey Cane. So does anybody want to expand a little bit on the culture of history of how we drink rum in the Caribbean? In anything I've said there? I mean, I know you were particularly fond, Mark, of talking about the chasers and being on the side.
Well, yeah, I mean, obviously, from what I've seen as a child growing up, and then go back when I've been back on holiday, in more recent time, I've been probably more interested in that kind of traditional, just understanding how people are drinking it there. And if you listen to the music, they'll talk a lot about, I don't want to chase with my rum. I've seen people actually prefer to consume it in that separate way because they want to drink the rum on its own, and they will drink whatever they're choosing to drink after. So it might be water, it might be, more times than not, it's a soft drink of some sort, and it could be any soft drink. Anything from your traditional Coca-Cola to whatever soft drink flavor they like. I've orange soda, cola champagne, anything. So yeah, I think that idea of mixing it probably came later on. The term, I think, chaser, I'm not sure if that's how it came about, but I could see it having been derived as a case of chasing the rum down your throat with this other thing, and the other thing could be anything from a box of fruit juice to
that's an interesting term, using the word chaser, because the chaser comes afterwards, doesn't it? If you think about being chased, it's the chaser is afterwards, isn't it? So,
yeah, we in Trinidad, the term I didn't know. I never heard it called a mixer until many years later. It would be chaser. That's what it's called. Even though it was being mixed in with the rum in a glass, it was still called chaser. You would ask, what you chasing with?
Right.
Would be the question you'd get asked. And as I say, I think that tradition probably came about as a result of the chasing of the alcohol. So you drinking it, and if you still go to a rum shop now, you're gonna get, as we spoke about before, you'll buy your bottle, you get a bowl of ice, you get some cups, and you choose what you're chasing it with. It might be coconut water or Coke or water or
Sprite
or ginger ale or whatever your choice of chaser is. And I know quite a few people that still consume it in that way, where they actually aren't making a mixed drink at the table. The ice might even be just going with the chaser. They shoot in the rum.
Right.
Separately, but
that also from the well, I don't know if you guys are into soca music and carnival, from the song "Strong Rum No Chaser." I just called King Bubba, I think his name is. I think he's from Barbados, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
And that also influences, like, the whole Caribbean thing, whereby, you know what, give me the rum, I don't want no chaser. And then after eventually, as Mark will put it, we have different ways of drinking the chaser, whereby the chaser will be separate, not mixed. So you knock back the rum and then you knock back the chaser, whether it be juice, water, and so on. So all those kind of songs and influences in the Caribbean influences us to actually say, you know what, don't give me no chase, I want to knock it back straight. And
right.
And
and Lizette in Grenada?
Yeah, so in Grenada, we typically in the rum shops, so there's rum shops and then there's bars. They're very different. The rum shops the rum shops are where, like in my local village, it's where the fisherman goes, and after he brings his boat in, he kind of, brings his fish, he's done his work for a week or whatever, and he goes to look for the closest rum shop. And they sell rum here in the rum shops in 1/8 and 1/4, or you could buy the bottle, but most people will do it in 8/8 here. So and the 1/8 is like an essence bottle. They use the old essence bottle.
Okay.
So they recycle the essence bottle, and I might have one. I'll show you guys later. But anyway,
something like this size, was it?
Right. Yeah, a bit bigger, a little bit. Maybe that one is a bit wide. Actually, that might be an 1/8. Yeah. So you'd get a rum like that, and they'd pour it in the glass, and they'd drink it. Sometimes they might chase it with something like a Guinness. Yeah. Right. So they drink the rum back, and then they say, "Give me a Guinness," and then they'll take their time with that. Sometimes they may say, "Give me a beer," and they take their time with that. But a lot of the time they'll drink it with the water. Ice is not something that they'll ask for all the time. People would get a bowl of ice, but it's not. Maybe they put a little bit, but they wouldn't overwhelm the drink with the ice.
And I think for me as well, spending time in my time in Jamaica, it was always a cross between city life and city. When I talk about city life, it was Montego Bay, which is technically a city, but it's not what you would consider as a European city in terms of size, but it was still an active working environment. And then I'd cry my eyes out when my mother would pack me away and send me up to my grandmother in the country.
Right.
Because there was no running water there and there was no electricity. So life was very different when you had to spend the weekend with grandma in the country. And obviously at that age, I'm not drinking, but you would obviously follow granddad down to the rum shop sometimes and sit outside. He would buy you a soft drink and you would watch him. And you're right. Ice was a lot of times ice was just not available in the country. Right. Yeah. It was a luxury item, even to some extent, even today, because somebody had to have bothered to put ice on. So I could understand when you say the rum shop that you didn't have ice. And I think defining of rum shop and rum bar in a lot of ways. The rum shop, in some senses, was an actual shop in some ways. It wasn't. You didn't go there. It didn't just serve liquor. It was a shop.
Which
so you'd leave there with a bag of rice and some flour after.
Tin of sausage or something.
Correct. Right. It was an actual shop where you could sit down and have a rum. Whereas a rum bar, you're specifically going there just to drink alcohol. Yeah. So, Manny, any experiences you'd like to share at this stage?
I was thinking about ice as a concept as well, because here in the UK, everyone loads everything up with ice, but I notice a lot in the Caribbean that they don't lean so much towards ice because they don't want to over dilute drinks, which is interesting because they're more interested in the flavors.
But I was gonna jump in and say something, man. Just as a side, when I first moved here, going to the pub, y'all in the UK, I found people here were very stingy with ice. If you go and you ask for ice,
they still are.
Drink. Ice for a drink. I remember going specifically, and this woman had worked in a pub. I can't remember what I was having, and I had 2 blocks of ice in it. 2 single blocks.
Two cubes.
Sorry, yeah, 2 cubes. And I was like, can I get some ice, please? And she looked at me as if I was asking her for like a kidney or something, and she gave me one more cube. And I was like, well, I haven't a drink. It's a long drink of lemonade. I want some ice in the drink. Like, so I had to basically force her to give me ice. And I'm saying, what you paying for ice by the cube? Was it a pound a cube or something? Was it you see, it's just ice. They were so stingy with it. I thought I was weird.
Well, it still goes on in the UK, and especially in a pub environment, and it's not even country pubs. You still go to pubs, and they put 3 cubes in the bottom. And
do you know why that is? Because they have bad old ice machines. So the ice machine is making 8 cubes an hour. So they don't want you to use up their entire ice cup for the rest of the evening.
Yeah. Also in St. Martin, I mean, before the terrible the hurricane that came from St. Martin, before that, when I went there, the ice was running out in St. Martin like crazy. They actually had ice machines in certain parts of the island where you had to actually go and get ice, because same thing what Mark said, they're very stingy with the ice. They put like 2 blocks of ice or 1. They know that the ice is finishing.
But yet, and before we move on, and I want to move on because obviously we've got a lot to talk about, but I mean, on the issue of ice, it's also driven by consumers. Now, I have in the Caribbean, in the UK here, a number of Caribbean friends that when we go out and they drink, they complain about the amount of ice that is in their drink. Yeah. Right? And the constant complaint is, I don't want my drink overly diluted. I don't want it watery. And then you sit there and you try and explain to them thermodynamics and the fact that the more ice you put in is the less dilution you get. And they look at you strange, like, are you an idiot? Right? Right? How is that possible?
I'm one to blame. Before I understood the logic of that, I thought the same. I thought that's nonsense. That don't make no sense. So
I have
to blame for that as well. But now I understand the logic behind it, though. Definitely.
I've had that conversation with many a customer at the races where they tell me they don't want ice, particularly in my rum punch. And I had to tell one woman once, if I give you less ice, you're not getting any more drink, right? There's a set amount of drink you get. So if you want no ice...
Yeah. They think they're getting more drink, don't they?
Right. You get the same amount. Also,
Mary just mentioned...
No ice, and she came back the next time and asked for ice because it was too strong. And I said, the drink is made to be consumed with ice in it. If I give you a glass packed with ice and I put the drink in there, it's not for you to drink quickly. It is to drink so that you are enjoying the drink and you have the same sip that you have when you start to when you finish. So you'll want to come back and have another one. I don't want you falling over. I want to keep you at a level. Yes, enough.
Mark, just tell the truth. You just want another sale.
I don't want you to fall over. I don't want you to get drunk. I want you to
good. Anyway, I just want to quickly, we're going to move on. Welcome to everybody, Patrick, Jim, Richie. Thank you, Kelvin, for giving some of the replies. I actually just realized my settings is not allowing me to write any replies. So if anybody feels to write replies, go ahead. But so let's move on to talking about chasers and mixers. And because we all contributed in this, and we're all going to talk separately about it. But we kind of narrowed down that there was a core set of mixers that was synonymous with pretty much every island, and it's probably not just pretty much every island, but pretty much every country in the world. None of these mixers are surprising to you, and they're all very much widely used with rum. And I'll tell you those mixers, and you'll not be surprised at anyone. Cola, and I use the word cola because obviously people automatically assume it's Coke, but it can be Pepsi or something else, right? Water and coconut water, which I'll put into the same togetherness, because Lizette is going to talk about that in a little while. And water, surprisingly, because I learned to drink rum with water. That was my first lessons in learning to drink rum. Ginger ale and ginger beer. We're going to get Mark and Kelvin to talk a little bit about that. Sprite or 7-Up in some worlds, which is technically a sparkling lemonade. And as you can see, those 5 core mixers, except for the coconut water and the water, they're all sparkling sodas, because we do consume, 1, a lot of sodas in the Caribbean, and 2, a lot of sugar in the Caribbean. Hence why diabetes is rife in the Caribbean, unfortunately. And the last thing that will be commonly used to chase, but we will not discuss that this week, because I think we addressed it in episode 2, which is fruit juices. And fruit juices are commonly as that chaser or mixer on the side. But the minute you start using a fruit juice with rum, you're moving into the direction of a rum punch. I think we could all agree on that sense. And we kind of dealt with rum punches in episode 2. So we won't talk too heavily on fruit juices unless somebody specifically has questions or the panel wants to make a comment on a particular fruit juice. So I'll kick off and I'll talk a little bit about cola. Cola being, as I've mentioned earlier, the most commonest mixer in the world for any spirit drink, and it is also the most commonest mixer for rum. And it was heavily popularized by a brand, Bacardi. We all know that Bacardi and Coke is the #1 selling probably rum drink in the world, even more so than the mojito. I think that's fair to say. The Bacardi and Coke is their signature drink, their signature serve. And it was quite interesting. In Cuba, which is probably the earliest records of the Bacardi and Coke, it's actually known as a Cuba Libre. Cuba Libre, actually the term came about because it essentially means the freedom of Cuba. And it was apparently in history suggested at the end of the Spanish-American War in 1898, an American colonel or general, an officer anyway, asked for, I need a Cuba Libre. Now, historically, they said that's quite strange because in 1898, there was no Coke on the island of Cuba, so they don't know how he requested that because Coke didn't arrive to Cuba until the 1900s. So there is apparently some historical evidence that there was another drink prior to the rum and Coke called the Cuba Libre, which was not with Coke. So apparently maybe he asked for that and didn't know what he was asking for. But then again, he might have asked for a rum and Coke because if he was an American officer, he may have had Coke, which was shipped with him from when he came down as the military. So Coke is still widely consumed. I've seen interesting experiences in a bar in London where somebody says, could I have a Cuba Libre? The bartender said, do you mean a rum and Coke? He was an American and he said, no, I want a Cuba Libre. And he says, yes, a rum and Coke. And he says, no, I asked for a Cuba Libre. So the bartender made him a Cuba Libre and charged him for a cocktail instead of a spirit mixer, which was £4 or £3 more. And he says, that's what you get. That's what you get. Right? Because it was the same drink if I'd given you a rum and Coke. So if anybody wants to argue the difference between a rum and Coke and a Cuba Libre, I'm more than welcome to hear your comments on that one. And I can mention one comment in growing up. And if you want some street credit, when you go to Jamaica, don't ask for a rum and Coke, ask for a rum and Pepsi. Because Pepsi by far is the dominant cola in Jamaica. Mm-hmm. Yes, that's purely by distribution, not by, I wouldn't say it's necessarily by taste. Pepsi Cola signed a contract with D&G, who are the biggest distributor of beer and soft drinks in Jamaica, whereas Coca-Cola signed a contract, I think, with Island Bottles, who were by far nowhere near the level of D&G. So Pepsi always outsold Coke, and it's just remained that way. Pepsi is still with D&G. So that is probably not out of necessarily taste. And there's not many countries in the world that can say Pepsi outsold Coke.
But also, I think the Pepsi Cola, I can't remember where they're based. I think they're based in Central America. The company that they own the rights to Ting and all that, those soft drinks as well. So because I deal with them here, and if you go, it traces back to that organization as well. So it's Pepsi Cola from somewhere in Central America, I believe. So yeah, right. So I could see that.
There's a comment by Keegan saying, "Isn't it the lime juice content?"
Keegan's actually right. So the difference between a rum and coke and a Cuba Libre is, there's more limes in it. There's maybe about at least 4 segments of lime in a Cuba Libre, and so you get a lot more oil off of the skin, and there's more juice as a result. And sometimes you add a little bit of fresh lime juice. So there is quite a distinct change when you add that much lime juice to just having a garnish of it.
But arguably, you couldn't give me a rum and coke without a lot of lime. So the technicality is right.
The technicality, yeah.
So a little bit of background on cola and the fact that it is still the most common one, and right across the region, every island talks about Coke. It drinks cola in their rum. It is still very popular, and we will discuss a cola drink a bit later on. So, Lizette, do you want to talk a little bit about water and coconut water?
Yeah. So definitely on the islands, second to Coke. Well, it depends on where you are on the islands, actually. But in the rural areas, coconut water is a huge water, definitely, but coconut water as well. If you're lucky to be able to get that, because obviously consuming coconut water, you want to do it fresh. So that's why in the rural areas you'll find coconut water is the perfect chaser and mixer. You know, some people will just put the rum in the coconut and drink it just so, or they'll put the rum first and then pour the coconut water as they desire. But yeah, so in Grenada, that's definitely like in the rural areas, especially where I'm located, coconut water is probably the #1 mixer for the fishermen and water. And so they'd usually, as I said, get an 1/8 of rum, pour it in a glass and drink that, and then drink immediately afterwards the water or coconut water. The coconut water adds some sweetness to it.